I'm going to try and keep it not necessarily short and sweet, but hopefully a little bit entertaining and fun. Don't worry, you're going to keep your clothes on. I'm very good with boundaries. Those of you who are hoping to be naked, the orgy, I think, is around the fire, late o'clock, at 7 o'clock tonight, after the drumming circle. No, I'm just kidding. I can see some little people at the back. They're definitely not coming in for this one, I don't think. All right, I think we should get going. We should start, because I think all of you have had quite a long day. It's been a day of a lot of consciousness and energy. And has anyone done any healing today? Has anyone? Oh, so you've all had good days. Have you gotten your ticket price worth? Are you coming back tomorrow or not? All right, so my name is Anne-Marie Clulow, and I actually was a singer and saxophonist and performer for about 30 years. And one day I was performing in a show called Cats, and when I hit one of the top notes, I had this, an experience I couldn't describe to anyone, including my husband, who is the cameraman, the long-suffering man over there. We've been together for 28 years, so yes, give him a round of applause. And I had this awakening, and I had a voice in my head that said I was about to go on to some sort of lovely spiritual journey. So I walked off stage in tears thinking, oh, I'm going to learn yoga and I'm going to wear white, and I'm going to be very holy and people are going to come and listen to me all the time. And then a couple of years later, I realized what that meant. And I was like, really? Sexuality? How is that spiritual? Talking about people's genitals. I don't want to do that stuff. I really didn't. But it was a calling, and it kept calling me back. I kept trying to escape, and it kept calling me back until eventually I gave up. And I said, okay, well, if I'm going to teach this stuff, I'm going to teach it in a way that it feels relevant and it's actionable and it's beautiful and it's pleasurable and all of those things. So I've done some Neo-Tantra work. I've done some Tantra work. I've done some Taoist sexual work, worked with the Kundalini, worked with the life force energy, all of those sorts of things. And this is what we're going to talk about today, is what happened to me last year, is I went into hospital to have an emergency hysterectomy. And I'm this person who now I teach intimacy. I've got coaches around the world who teach this work. And I've had a 2-hour orgasm, AW-Egasm. Yes, it can happen, and it's a technique. Thank you, husband, person. You can understand the 28 years now. But the point being that I thought I had it waxed when it came to, well, excuse the pun, but I thought I knew what I was doing when it came to intimacy and amazing pleasure experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And then I went into hospital to have this emergency hysterectomy. And while we were in there, I woke up in high care because things had gone wrong during the surgery, not majorly. And my husband came to visit me and said, you didn't wake up in the room you were supposed to wake up in because, there was a problem with your breathing and blah, blah, blah. And of course, I started to panic. And he did one of the techniques on my feet and on my legs. And until that point, I couldn't sleep. And he started doing what we teach as a sensuality technique on my feet and on my legs. And I fell asleep deeply. And I think it was also the drugs. I will be honest. I don't think I'm that spiritual. I think it was the drugs as well. But I had another experience of understanding how intimacy and connection is so important when it comes to healing. So that's with yourself and also with your partner or partners, depending on what your belief system looks like. So what I want to say to you first and foremost is it going to work for me? Yes. There is only one nervous system for pleasure and for pain. This is important to remember because we think that the nervous system for pain is different to the nervous system for pleasure. It isn't. So we need to understand how the nervous system works a little bit so that we can get feedback for healing and for bliss and relaxation. Bliss and relaxation are deeply healing in a lot of ways that we don't understand when we first go into a healing space from a sick space. So your nervous system priorities are to keep you alive, staying alive. Yes, exactly that. The CPR technique, and that's the song you're supposed to sing when you're doing CPR. Nervous system wants to keep you alive. So it's hard to heal in survival mode. So when you've had something happen to you that's really awful, what happens is your body starts running adrenaline, it starts going into the sympathetic nervous system, and it's in survival mode. Bliss and relaxation can move you out of survival mode. Survival mode is self-care and we care. So you can see the list here. I'm not going to go through it all because I'm not going to keep you for an hour and a half. But healing and rest is often based in medication to induce rest and restructuring. It's often pain-based. It's not about touch and connection. And also your system shuts down when you're in healing mode. It goes into survival mode and you actually become antisocial. Your body wants to protect you and hermit you. So you have to make a conscious decision to move into a different nervous system to enable more healing. Healing through bliss is healing through oxytocin and human connection. Now, you've all seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't need to show you that. But when you're in the bottom level of that, you're in the sympathetic nervous system and you are just trying to survive. If you've just had surgery or if you've just had a disease or there's illness happening, often that's not the time that you can use all of the tools and techniques that you can use when you can consciously move into the parasympathetic nervous system. You're in the sympathetic nervous system and you're in panic. Your body wants to keep you alive. At the end of the day, we are also mammals. And we have a reptilian brain and an amygdala and all of these things that as spiritual as we want to be, as spiritual as we can be, sometimes we've got to get out of survival mode to be able to become self-aware and to work towards better awareness within our lives, etc. So, keep pointing at the wrong place, don't I? When we're depleted, we go into survival mode. When we're in survival mode, we perceive others as a threat. So when you are needing healing and you're actually needing other people around you, what happens is you tend to become quite antisocial and grumpy. You don't want to see people. You don't want to do peopling. You're in survival mode. And I can see people nodding, so I'm not the only one who becomes a grumpy dragon monster when I'm in those spaces. Self-care, therefore, is we care. Yeah, go on. We've been doing this all day, of course. Now, here we go. People think that there's only one or two types of rest. There aren't. As you can see, there are lots of different... Oh, hello, it's gone. Let's go back. It's going, hurry up. No. There we go. Right. So when we are healing, generally speaking, let's say we go in and we have surgery, we come out of surgery, what do we normally get? We get some physical rest sometimes, and we get some sleep sometimes. But a lot of these other things don't happen. We don't get emotional rest because the medical aid needs to be paid and there's bills coming in. And this is the stuff of life. We don't get sensory rest because sometimes we're undergoing physiotherapy or more pain. People are jabbing us with needles, etc. Social rest. People want to come and visit us when we're in the hospital. So there's no social rest. You've got to try and be nice and maybe even put a face on if you're a woman and you're worried about being seen without your face on. Sometimes that happens, And also mental rest because of all the things that happen when you get sick. You're worried about your partner or partners. You're worried about your family who's looking after you. You don't want to be a burden. All these things are happening. So when you move into the healing space, we don't move into the healing space fully. What tends to happen is we get stuck on a little bit of sleep and bed rest, but our mind's going mad, our social plans are going mad, the bills are piling up. All these things are happening at the same time. So we don't get to move into the correct nervous system for bliss and relaxation, which is also the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is the rest and digest system, which we need to heal our bodies. It's also the nervous system that's most common to be in when you have an out-of-body experience or a spiritual experience. If you think of things like yoga, meditation, the breathing exercise we did with the lady who channeled just before this talk, all of those things take us into the parasympathetic nervous system. They gear us down and they make us feel safe. The parasympathetic nervous system will only be operational if you feel safe and relaxed. It's a gear change in the body, and it's very accessible through bliss and relaxation and pleasure. Yes. That's the exciting part. There's also links to vagal toning and polyvagal theory, but that's another whole thing. So thinking about libido and sensuality are affected by these things. Now, you know this if you've ever lost your sex drive and lost your sort of lustful life, or your partner, if you've been in a long-term relationship and you've been sick, libido disappears. Extended adrenaline states. So that was like the whole of COVID for me. Extended distress, don't know if you're going to keep your job, worried about what's going to happen in the future. Certain medications, SSRIs, antidepressants, hormonal replacements, etc., etc. At one point after my hysterectomy, I actually said to my husband, I don't know what I'm going to do, because how can I authentically teach about conscious sexuality and intimacy if I've got no libido? The idea of any sort of play or sex was like, no way. I actually started crying and said to him, I think you're going to have to find someone else because I can't do it. I can't be authentic. No, seriously, the mood swings were terrible. I was a dragon. So, certain sorts of medication can save you in the sense that they put me on HRT because 100 years ago you have an emergency hysterectomy, you die. You don't get to reform your endocrine system. So surgical menopause is a process you're supposed to go in over 3 to 7 years, and it's overnight. So it's pretty awful. It's like puberty on steroids. And then plus you're getting older as well. So, it's not fun. It didn't feel very spiritual, I have to tell you. So here's someone who's got it waxed when it comes to intimacy and pleasure and all of these things. And I am a goddess and the whole bit. And now suddenly I'm thinking, it's all gone. What am I going to do? Because it's not there and I can't find out how to fix this. They've got a so-called solution for men, take Viagra, but for women, there's nothing. So it's like, how do I get it back? Learning curve. So, and emotional effects on the nervous system as well. Again, this goes back to which nervous system are you in? Which nervous system are you choosing to be in? Sometimes you choose, sometimes you don't choose. Depends on how much adrenaline is there. So you have to learn how to relax into bliss and sensuality. And there are lots of ways to do that. But sensuality in our world has a deep connotation with sexuality. And sexuality is the difficult one for people because that's in the box marked sex. It's like we do with holistic healing, but not our genitals. That's not part of our body. It's like we can heal everywhere else, but no, that's separate. That's different. No, it's not. It's part of your body. So you've got to learn to integrate it. And if you want to heal and there's disease happening and you want more intimacy, you've got to learn how to relearn how to relax into bliss and relaxation. And the old methodologies may not work. So you might not even be able to go to a yoga class or go to a meditation, etc. You might not even be able to get into your car to drive somewhere because you're so exhausted from being sick, from being ill. So that's why I actually designed something called Bliss Class, and I offer it for free online, is that you actually do it while you're lying down and you fall asleep. Because when you can actually make the decision to relax and move into the different types of rest in the parasympathetic nervous system, you've got more chance of healing. And then you're in the parasympathetic nervous system and your libido has a chance of returning. And it's important for those of us who are in relationship. I don't know about you guys, but I really did panic when it disappeared because I'd never experienced nothing. I'd experienced, I've still got to make lunch and, I don't know, all right, we'll have a quickie. I've experienced that before, and we've all done that. We're in long-term relationships. Sometimes we do things out of a sense of obligation. It's not necessarily, the whole bit, Sorry, my love, but this is the truth. Often women nod because you're thinking about making lunch and the rest of it. And the tired woman, generally speaking, doesn't have a lot of libido. A tired man on the other side does because it's a de-stressor for men. Estrogen and testosterone work very differently in the body. That's another whole conversation, but anyway. So what we learn with pleasure, we never forget. And if we learn how to relax into bliss and into sensuality, we can separate sensuality out from sexuality. They are not the same thing. They've got a lot in common. But being sensual is not the same as being sexual, which is why I came up with the term sensualness. Because sensuality, when you say that to people, they're like, it's just a little bit too uncomfortable for me because that's still in the same line as sexuality. No, it's a conscious decision to be using your senses and to be sensual and to change into the parasympathetic nervous system so that you can deeply relax and feel bliss and rest and digestion and all of those things that the healing system needs in your body. And you've got to make a conscious decision to do that, because if you try and heal the way we normally heal, it's not going to happen automatically. You're going to have to make a decision to do it. Our belief systems around sexuality affect our sensuality. And that's also when you think about what I call sexpectations. So sometimes you want to be sensual, but maybe your partner wants to get jiggy with it. And so they're taking your sensuality and your cuddles and the oxytocin and all of that as a sexual cue to move into lovemaking or into intercourse of some description. And sex expectations are the quickest way to undo sensuality. So that's why I'm talking about sensualness, and that actually starts with you on your own. You can do those exercises on your own to start relaxing into the correct nervous system so that sensuality can become its own thing. It's not always tied to sexuality and to your intimate life. Okay, we don't need to go through all of this, obviously, but this is the wheel of intimacy. There's a dance that happens in your body, and for everybody, it's different. So for some people, they're very sensual, and estrogen tends to make us more colorful in our emotions and more interested in sensual awareness and relaxation. Often for women, it takes them 27 minutes to get into the right state to have multiple orgasms or to even have pleasure peaks. 27 minutes, unless you know the Taoist shortcuts. There are shortcuts, which is good news for anyone who wants to learn them. But 27 minutes. No, when you've been in a relationship a long time, 27 minutes is a long time. I can hear some laughter going on here, so we definitely is going, yes, it is a long time. No, but it is. We run differently. Men tend to run a lot more fire yang energy. Women tend to run a lot more yin of the slower energy. And you can see in this wheel, there's a dance. So for me, what feels very yin and very relaxed may not be the same as what you feel. But it's your balance and my balance. So you just got to find the balance. And we polarize sexuality because we put sexuality all into the fire stuff, all into, feeling turned on, feeling aroused, all of those things. Arousal in the nervous system doesn't actually mean sexual arousal. It just means that the nervous system is working. And sometimes that means adrenaline and blood flow and actually shutting down certain areas of your body. So we want to arouse the nervous system in a yin way, which is a deeply relaxed way, not a yang way, which is a contractive way. And there are different sorts of orgasms you can have as well, because a contractive orgasm is, generally speaking, a friction-based orgasm. We can mostly figure it out. There's plenty of material online to help you figure that out if you haven't gotten it right yet. And that's also consistent with fertility and being young, etc. The way we make love and have intimacy in our 20s is not the way we can make love and have intimacy in our 30s and beyond. It can become better. I call it the midlife pleasure awakening. Women's sexual peak starts at around, because it's different for everyone, 35. So this thing of as you grow older, you're just not going to have an intimate life, it's nonsense. It's what the media wants to sell you, but it's not true. So those are just things that you can see what the sympathetic nervous system is using and what the parasympathetic nervous system is using. And obviously, they're not completely separate. There is a dance going on all the time between the inhale and the exhale, which nervous system you're in. But when you're in the parasympathetic nervous system, most spiritual experiences happen there. Think about the things that make you deeply aware, deeply relaxed. Those are the things that you're doing. You're in the parasympathetic nervous system. You can actually feel the gear change. And that is where self-awareness and that becomes possible. And you can use pleasure to access those states. So we were speaking a little bit about contractive and expansive pleasure. Again, this is the dance that happens between the two. So contractive is your adrenaline and new relationship energy, feeling very turned on, that fire. And it's delicious. It's not wrong, but it's one experience. So when you have the expansive experiences, this often happens in midlife because you've got the time. And you can also be used beyond sexual pleasure. So my husband rubbing my feet in the hospital and then I fell asleep was a huge awakening for me. I was thinking he's using a technique we use for intimacy and it's sending me to sleep. And that's what made me start thinking about healing and our approach to healing and intimacy and how we can be laying hands upon one another to help heal as well. And we need different sorts of rest and choosing which nervous system we want to be in. Okay. There we go. Why sensual relaxation is different. It's not the same as generalized relaxation. It's a somatic experience. It takes priority in the body. Now, we like to do, well, I'm going to speak for myself here. If I could do everything in my brain, I would. It's so ironic considering what I do for a living, because I like to do things in my brain where I can make sense of things. But sometimes the innate intelligence of the body has to make sense of it for you. So you've got to have a somatic experience while you're here being in this form that you've incarnated in. Sometimes we have to work with it, not against it, not try and do everything from the heart up, but include everything, including the innate intelligence and wisdom of the body and how we receive pleasure and conscious touch. Conscious touch is very much a sensual experience. It's part of sensualness, but it's not necessarily sexual, but it's still intimate. One of the most intimate experiences I ever had was when he rubbed my feet in the hospital and I fell asleep because I felt so vulnerable. So that was incredibly intimate. But was it sexual? No, not at all. And that's my husband put all the funny memes in. So you can use the sensualness techniques for healing and for pleasure because they release oxytocin. Oh, I promise you I haven't been drinking. It's just been a long day. Conscious touch releases endorphins and oxytocin, and life force energy is deeply linked to sensuality. So also things that happen in yoga classes with the life force energy, the root chakra, all of those things, it's not necessarily sexual. It can be. So don't get me wrong. Some people have a Kundalini awakening, which is a massive orgasm that rubs through the body and they know what it is. There's no mistaking it. If you're saying, have I had an orgasm? Probably not. Because when it happens, you pretty much know what it is. And it's called le petit mort for a reason, the little death, because it takes us into a different state of consciousness. So we need to learn to consciously make this energy accessible to ourselves and not just be using it for sexuality. We need to be using it for intimacy and for sensualness. So you can use all of these techniques just for creating connection and relaxation and therefore healing. So especially when you're running into something difficult in your relationship, that is illness, surgery, all of those sorts of things. If you've got these techniques under your belt, you can keep your intimacy up. You can keep certain pleasure levels up without being bound to sex expectations or the same sort of intimacy you've been having your whole life. Thanks. There we go. I'm sure you've seen this one, so I'm not going to go completely through it. Oh, there we go. I'll have to go back one. But the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And this is happening faster and faster and faster in our world at the moment. Because we can't stick with what we always knew and do what we always did, because then we get what we've always gotten. So sometimes we've got to let go of things that are very difficult. And sexuality is hugely difficult for most people. Even just to talk about it is really difficult. But often when people find out what I do for a living, they're like, oh, can I talk to you? But not in front of those people. Let's just go over here. Because they've all got questions and they all want to know things. And we have very few spaces where we can talk about this stuff just openly as a discussion of the body as a holistic being. Did it go back to the monkeys? No. Didn't go back to the monkeys. Let's see if it goes back to the monkeys. There we go. So this is just an experiment that they've done, and this is what we do as humans. We're just monkeys with anxiety sometimes. And we all, people who are attending this festival, we're people who want to have something different in our consciousness and our awareness and our spirituality and all of those things. And sometimes we forget that we're also mammals. We've got to work with our nervous system. There is only one nervous system. So we need to choose consciously what part of the nervous system we want to be in. And we can use various techniques to get there. But if we carry on doing what the parents and the authorities have taught us and not looking to eat the bananas, because the bananas get you sprayed with water. I mean, you think about your teachings that you've had at school or from your parents. Very few people get teachings about pleasure and connection and intimate relations being a beautiful thing. Most people have said, don't get pregnant and you'll catch some terrible disease and die. It's very negative. It's not about this beautiful connection and play that we can have as adults. As long as there are certain boundaries put in place and your belief systems are respected, your intimacy is your form of play as an adult. It's your way to find joy and laughter and fun. And we laugh a lot. I think it's because I'm funny, but, I think my husband would disagree. But the point being that we need to change how we're thinking about intimacy. And also during places of illness and disease, if we don't change our approach to intimacy, it can become very difficult within a partnership or within a relationship. We can lose our relationships sometimes because we do all have needs as well. I'm not saying that having sex is a need, but fertility and shelter and food and water is considered a human need under the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I know there are some people in the world who are asexual, but most of us respond well to conscious touch at the very least and to sensuality, not necessarily actually reproducing, but sensuality and being connected to other human beings. And we're all so terrified of it, especially men. Because for men, most of their conscious touch comes through their sexual partner. They don't get a lot of conscious touch when it doesn't come to actually having sex with someone or it being an invitation to go further down the intimate path with someone. So I want to leave you with those thoughts of thinking about, your intimacy and what your needs are. And when you move into a place of difficulty, which often happens midlife, don't waste a great crisis. A crisis is a moment of opportunity if you choose to use it. So those are the thoughts I'm leaving you with. The nervous system is the same. Sexuality and sensuality are not the same thing. And if you learn sensuality and sensual wellness techniques, you can use them in your healing, in your intimacy, in your partnership, and in your life. It's not just stuff about sex. It's about everything. Let's integrate it. Let's put it together and have a lot more pleasure and play in the world. And that was my talk for today, people. Thank you very much.